I went to an urgent care and they thought it was pneumonia. 2 to 3 hours later, my phone rang and it was from the same place. And they said that it was a mass, a lung mass. I finally spoke to my doctor and she says, okay, let me send you for a CAT scan. There were other parts that started lighting up. She says, well, the results confirm what we thought because you have lymph nodes in your chest that are swollen. My liver had like 2, 3 lesions. Doctor said it was stage 4 cancer, right?
I was bleeding heavily, big blood clots, feeling weak, unable to function. I went to the doctor. He told me I had fibroids. He did a couple tests. He did a sonogram. I had fibroid. It was 6 centimeters large. I left that office, but I was determined I didn't want to do surgery. He told me the only hope is doing a hysterectomy. I didn't want to go that way.
I was diagnosed with MS in 2008. The doctor immediately prescribed a drug called Avonex. You're going to go to a MS center and learn how to inject yourself for the rest of your life. That's just symptom management. That's all they know. The most likely outcome is you in a wheelchair. And that's the best that they could offer is say, okay, symptom management. I knew in my heart that there was something else I could do.
So I was given 2 chronic diagnoses. One is chronic lymphatic leukemia, which is a blood-borne cancer, and the other is chronic bronchitis. Chronic bronchitis is a form of COPD. I was told by my physicians that hospice care would be the next step for me. I had 2 brothers who succumbed to COPD, and they lived a very miserable life. They had to actually fight for each one of their breaths. My father was also diagnosed with leukemia and COPD. And I decided that I wanted to change. I wanted to do something about it. I did not want to go out of life that way.
Look at all the millions of people every year working in hospitals and research centers and universities with governmental agencies, all have something in common. They all want to find cures to overcome many diseases, heart disease, cancer, mental illness. And we've been doing this for decades. We've had an official war on cancer for over 45 years. But here's the issue, and here's what the new good news is. We can now say unequivocally that today we have found cures. For diabetes, for arthritis, depression and anxiety disorders, dementia, memory loss, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, osteoporosis, and many other conditions that hitherto we would have said, well, we can treat it, we can keep you on medications, we can control many of the symptoms, but we can't really reverse the conditions. I'm in a wonderful place. This is a place where people come to relax and de-stress and detoxify their bodies. It's like a wellness retreat. It's down in Texas. And you're going to meet some people here, plus I'm going to go around the United States and introduce you to physicians, board-certified medical doctors. Many are also professors and nutritionists and people who every day are helping people in their journey of wellness.
I've been involved with light therapies for about 17 years. I was reading a magazine about how light therapy did some things, and really it's one of the throwaway journals, and I was ready to throw it away, and I noticed that the fellow that wrote the article lived close to home, had the same area code. So I called him. I said, why do you say things like that you can treat all these conditions and nobody's doing it? That just doesn't sound right to me. And he said, you're like everybody else. You won't listen or have a look. I'm not a doctor. I'm an electrical engineer. But my office is 5 minutes from where you live, and my home is too, so we should treat a couple of patients and see what happens. So he invited me to go to his office, which I did, and I brought a patient who had MS. And he was hunched over. He really had come from home. He was in bed. And we treated him for about 15 minutes. His pain was better. He was more upright, and I was flabbergasted. He said, do you want to try and do more of your patients? I said, sure. So on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays after work from 5 to 7, I would take 2 or 3 patients there, and we did that for 3 months. And when we were done, most of those patients were improved, to my shock. And we've developed a whole system of how you use light therapies to help people with painful conditions, to prevent problems that can occur from surgeries, for recovery that's speedier. It reduces inflammation, it increases circulation. With cells that are damaged from a stroke or loss of blood flow for some reason, or just trauma, you can make more ATP, up to 50% more. And in the areas around the injury, you can get recovery right now.
I actually have been in electronics almost all of my life. Then I moved on to UC Berkeley, where I worked for 15 years in fusion research, and I ended up working 3 grants with NASA Ames. And one day I got a call at home from a company in Silicon Valley, and they told me they had been invited over to see the equipment that I designed, and they would like me to replicate it for their systems. So we were the inventors of the first digital infrared camera. Made a coprocessor for the camera and made applications for orthopedic surgeons. Got a medical director that had a neuroscience institute. And I started going to all the neurology meetings and trying to understand how the nerves worked and what we were seeing in the images. And I developed a digital system so the frequencies would be exact. I'm interested in the pathogens. A lot of the cancer is caused by viruses. Try to eliminate the viruses that live in the bacteria.
We're going to be working with Mariana, who has had MS. She's 20 years old and has a 3-year history of it. Has MRI-proven lesions in her brain and spinal cord, and still has problems with her balance right now. It's the relapsing remitting type. So this machine that Maurice has invented really is interesting, because what it does is it does an electronic culture of what's in your body, what microbes are in your body. So you don't have to put them on a culture medium. It actually measures them with the technology that he's developed. And when you see large amounts of any microbe that surfaces from this test, it gives you an idea, just like a culture would, like for a strep throat or some other kind of infection that you might have.
Okay.
So we don't have to do all that by using the electronics he's developed. And he's also managed to figure out how to do the harmonics of the light that's used to treat the microbes that you might have with your MS. Nobody really knows what causes MS, but there are certainly theories that include viruses or perhaps other kinds of microorganisms. So he's going to scan you, and then we're going to find out if you have anything that might be worth taking a look at.
It'll start going across there, and then it'll show up about 30 seconds later on the screen.
Oh, look at that. There they are. And
So
right now it's just low amplitude, which is what you want to see.
That's kind of like a baseline of all the different bacterias and stuff, critters. But we can also just look at the kinds of things that are there. This one right here to use as an example, okay? So then maybe you can read me that number.
It's 331, 200. So what's this doing, Maurice?
Well, this light is actually putting these frequencies that are shown on this spectrum analyzer into her body. And we're using 8 different wavelengths of light, from far infrared to blue. So something like 400 nanometers all the way out to about 1 micron.
It works in 2 ways. One is to take care of the microbes, okay? The other is to actually do the healing with light on your nerves, which we've seen many times before.
It's a virus.
I know.
It's a virus. We're hiding.
Yeah, he woke him up. What's going on here?
It's
396, 450.
here it is right here.
What is it? Nothing I ever heard of.
CAP
Capillaria
HEPATIC.
hepatica. It's a new discovery for me. Is there any difference or is it about the same?
Almost the same,
What do you mean almost?
but normally when I get to like the third step, I'll fall over because I'll trip on one of my feet.
So why aren't you tripping and falling over?
I feel a little bit stronger and more stable. It's not as shaky as normally I am.
And how about the sensation in your feet?
I feel stronger.
As you feel the bottoms of your feet on the carpet, does that feel any different than it did before? Either do you feel the carpet any better or worse, or is it about the same?
I feel the carpet more, yeah.
So your sensation is better.
Yes.
Hallelujah. That's great news.
Len Saputo, he used the lights on my spine and on my brain. So when he was doing that, I felt a tingling sensation on my right leg, which is the leg that was numb for the longest time this last summer. And I also felt chills go up and down in different body parts. And it was like my nerves were waking up. And then we tried walking, and I felt like I had more stability walking. And then we tried walking a single file line, and I can actually do it without falling over.
Before you'd fall?
Before I would fall over on the third step.
Now you don't.
No, I don't.
How about standing on one leg?
Standing on one leg, I can stand on one leg for 15, 20 seconds. Before I couldn't even get my foot off the ground.
I couldn't walk without a cane. I couldn't balance. Now I can get up, I can move, they told me not to be too, not to try dancing, but I think I could dance too. My mental clarity is much better. I can see better. My neck is just free.
His speech was always, if I ask some question, takes a while. If I ask a choice, he said, you decide, and very slowly. But now, with doctor, his question, he answers quickly, and the doctor was joking and he was laughing. He likes joke, but recently, last 1 year, he hardly smiled. So now he was laughing, and he was on doctor's joke. He was laughing.
She was crying.
He said, I can walk, and he walked.
I can sing too.
The most impressive thing I've seen in 52 years of practice is light therapies and what they do to help people who are suffering from a wide range of conditions.
You'll see people who had irreversible conditions completely reversed, totally normal. The trouble is that's not getting out into the mainstream media. What is that there's a new miracle drug, but unfortunately it never ends up being a miracle. So we put almost all of our energy into a pharmacological approach to disease. If somehow you're a broken machine and the medical community is coming in to fix it. Instead, I'm going to show you that we're not machines, we're not mechanistic, and there's a whole different approach to wellness, both in prevention and in treatment. In my clinical trials, I've selected people who have conditions, let's say high blood pressure, or another one with arthritis, and another one with depression or anxiety or diabetes or heart disease. And then using nothing but healthy habits like good diet, exercise, and stress management, I've been able to see over a period of, let's say, a year. What was the difference? You have your profile when you come in, you have your blood chemistry and your medical workup, and how did it change at the end? And were they able to sustain it? I did a brain study where to get into the study group for 16 months, you had to have a medically diagnosed and under treatment Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, dementia, memory loss.
We had one study that was just for brain issues, and I was the nurse involved with it, We had a board-certified neurologist involved with it, so it wasn't as if we didn't have medical personnel. We had lots of medical personnel. Gary's a nutritionist. And I watched these people go from being very chronically ill to reversing their illness.
Kenny, who you're going to see also, he reversed in stage multiple sclerosis.
I'm 10 years MS free. I'm not in a wheelchair, and my quality of life is phenomenal. All you know in life is whatever's been presented to you, whether it be from your family, an educator, authority figure, and for the most part, that's all people go with. Anything that really worked, then we would know about it, it'd be in the media, and it would be out already, and everyone would be using it. The problem is not everyone looks at the politics of it and says, well, okay, well, if that were to be so, who's losing out? Who's not making money anymore? All the businesses that make money off the prescription drugs. Everything that's of the current paradigm has nothing to do with a healing state. You have environmental toxins that aren't good for you. You have conditioning and identity in food that tastes so delicious. It's why the cards are stacked up against you, because you have something that's terrible for you. You have any kind of conditioning from your upbringing. Do you have someone that has raised you that's dysfunctional, angry, and you have that energy? How do you handle all these other outside elements? Ozone therapy, chelation therapy, vitamin drips, exercise, meditation, stress management, learning to not personalize things, learning to be able to go with the flow of life and allow things to be what they are, learning to not have so many expectations. When you put all of that together, that's when you heal. So it's not just the diet, it's everything else. And in my opinion, for me at least, the meditating part and learning to have a calm mind really did it, because they say that nothing kills you faster than stress. So it makes sense that your most important thing to look at would be the antithesis for that. And meditation is, in my opinion, the #1 thing to do it.
I was trained in orthodox medicine, and that's what I practiced. And because I knew nothing else, I believed that this is what I went into nursing for. Unfortunately, through those years, I noticed that people just didn't get well. We had a lot of treatments, we made a lot of money. Everything was about the bottom line for the hospital. How can we increase our revenues? How can we increase our turnover? And then people will come back in. It was as if that was okay and that was normal. And while I felt it was a great privilege that these people put their lives in our hands as health professionals, on some level I felt that I was betraying them, because we could never really cure anything that they had. We had lots of synthetic drugs, we had lots of diagnostic testing, we had surgery, we had radiation, we had chemotherapy, and more synthetic drugs for the side effects of those. And then they'd succumb to the side effects of their treatments and their drugs, and then we'd put them into hospice, which was a whole nother cost center for the hospital. Then I became sick. I realized I had developed hepatitis B from an emergency hall patient that we all got hepatitis B from. I had herpes 1, herpes 2, herpes 6. I had cytomegalovirus, and I also had Epstein-Barr virus. I suffered with very severe acne. I learned later on because of primarily my diet. What do they give you? They give you antibiotics. The side effects of antibiotics is yeast overgrowth. When you have yeast overgrowth, you crave sugar. So my diet was essentially sugar, caffeine, dairy, meat, poultry. It's what everybody did. After that, I developed breast cancer. So when I was diagnosed myself with all these chronic illnesses, I decided that I was not going to go that route. And that's when I started exploring other areas. I kept thinking to myself, with all the technology we have, there has to be a better way.
I made an appointment to meet Luan. And when I met her, I told her exactly what was happening to me. And she gave me a protocol to follow. I did that, exercise, meditate, did my shakes, stopped eating meat, or no meat at all, no dairy. And it was a little difficult, to change that lifestyle. But I was determined, to make it happen for me. And after a year, I went back to the said doctor. He did another sonogram. And I was very happy to know after that protocol and persistent with the diet and everything, that fibroid shrank from 6 centimeters to 0.9. And I know there's hope for other women out there who have this fibroids, and you think hysterectomy is the only way out, but no, it could happen. With determination and persistent and the right diet and care, it could happen. So it have hope.
So I thought, what do I have to lose? So I decided to go on the retreat. They were doing the juicing, as many as 16 juices a day, having the vegan food at each meal, bathing in the mineral water, yoga, and interacting with the animals, breathing the clean air. The first week we did 2-mile walks, and then we went to 3-mile walks. I struggled with each one of those days and walking because I could actually get some of the oxygen into my lungs, but my lungs would not process that oxygen. Gary did energy work on me. As I was doing my 3-mile walk, for the first time my lungs opened and I was able to breathe better than I've ever been able to breathe in the last 8 years. Before we knew it, we all had done a marathon. And I had done an ultra marathon, 30 miles. There's nothing that can limit me at this point. So I feel born again. My lungs feel anew. And I'm just happy to be alive. And unfortunately, my brothers who died from COPD, I'm doing what they couldn't do. So I'm asking them to walk with me. And they are with me. Since returning from the retreat, I've gone to both my primary care physician and my oncologist. My primary care physician actually said that she could not find any obstruction in my lungs with the CT scan and with some other procedures. But she was actually baffled. My primary care physician actually said that, Ron, if you were not doing what you're doing, your quality of life would have deteriorated and you would be dead by now. With my oncologist, I was given the diagnosis of chronic lymphatic leukemia about 9 years ago. My white blood cell count has gradually gone up during that period of time, never dropping more than 2,000 to 3,000 in the white blood cell count. After returning from the retreat, I went in to see my oncologist. My white blood cell count has decreased by 46,000 counts. It is mind-boggling to my oncologist. I can't explain it. I just know I'm experiencing a much better quality of life, a new outlook on life, one that allows me to know that I can exceed my limitations.
There was another whole world out there beyond orthodox medicine. There was a true science versus the pseudoscience that I was raised on. I started to learn that when the drug companies wanted a drug to get approved, all they had to do was hire a ghostwriter and say what they wanted to hear, and only pick the patients that did okay on the drugs, but not all the patients that either died or had severe side effects. I just found that to be morally and ethically wrong. I embarked on a journey of getting credentialed in integrative and alternative medicine. I had the privilege of working closely with Gary Null and the patients that he had cured. Yes, he had cured. And I reversed mycoplasma pneumonia, herpes 1, herpes 2, herpes 6, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, hepatitis B, breast cancer. I reversed them all. It took me 3 years of intensive work of my lifestyle combined with the intravenous therapies, and I reversed.
A friend of mine who is a doctor as well, so he was like, maybe this lady can help. She's really good. She's outstanding. If I recommend her to you, just explain to me things that will be best to pay attention to. And if you're interested, you have to change a lot of stuff in your life. I started changing from regular habits of a human being, right? Eating meat, drinking, having anything that you could think in the world that was labeled to eat, I would eat. I didn't mind. I was almost 300 pounds. Sugar was like my first enemy, and I adore sugar. And trying to meditate, but when this hit me, I started learning the only way to be able to survive this thing was changing my so-called regular life, right? It's like I'm newborn. It's like I had a death sentence, and then I was able to be born again. And I'm not talking in the religious sense or anything like that. I'm talking in the sense in how you feel when you get a diagnosis that most people fear. When you're diagnosed with lung cancer, stage 4, very few people talk about restaging. Very few. And that's what we're talking about. I don't have the lymph nodes in my chest anymore. I don't have the lesions in my liver. I don't have the mass, it's only a scar left. The hip, not there. If anyone needs proof, I have it. I have 10,000 lesions. I had a liver biopsy. I had brain surgery because of a lesion. I don't have none of that. I didn't need radiation in my body. So, you see me.
If you lose hope in your life, in recovering from an illness, that causes an immunological chronic helplessness. And that's been shown very clearly that when someone loses hope, that's the fastest way to shut down an immune system. A responsible professional will say, on the average, people have 6 months to live. Now, we have outliers who live 10 years. And what we do is we're going to be looking at those outliers. What are they doing differently? That it's not just genetics. And then you and I are going to explore that so that we can then put you into the outlier place rather than into the average, which puts you into a genetic sentencing. And people actually die when they're giving those sentences much faster than if they're given some hope with some ways of looking into it, not just wishful thinking, but good science.
In so many cases, I see people that have been to other doctors and just don't want to be on multiple medications or don't want to have a surgery that may not be 100% necessary. That's where I've taken this information gathered from the patient and start to correct their vitamins, minerals, hormones, absorption, digestion, immune response, put the good things into the body, correcting vitamins based on the blood test, pull the bad things out of the body, like heavy metals. Those are contributing to a wide range of autoimmune and neurologic diseases, like MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, stroke, arrhythmias, cancers. So we want to pull out the bad and put in the good. My approach has always been comprehensive and teach the patient everything that's going on with their body. So whether it's arthritis, Alzheimer's, COPD, diabetes, liver, kidney, heart issues, musculoskeletal concerns, cancers, there's a great deal more we can learn about your body to be able to change the underlying process. And that's the only way that your body will see significant improvement. I've used a variety of different therapies, separate and beyond correcting vitamins and minerals orally. We'll do vitamin shots intramuscularly. Vitamin D shots are really important to help to keep your vitamin D levels up close to 100 on your blood test. Intravenous vitamin therapy, where we can show research that documents that large doses of vitamin C can help to quadruple your killer cells. We'll also use chelation therapy, oxygenating therapies, so a wide range of different things. Another very important area to assess is the immune response in reference to allergy. Many people have delayed reactions to foods and don't realize that the foods they're eating every day are creating antibody binding, and over the course of a week, they may have symptoms, but not correlated with the food. So we have to do allergy testing that's accurate, intradermal skin testing, and help to frame a diet so that you're not eating foods you're allergic to. That, on top of the fact that a lot of grains now are genetically modified, we have to take those out of the diet because all that will do is cause irritation. And irritation of the gut from a food allergen or a grain makes it difficult to absorb your vitamins and minerals and the good components of your food. So that's an area we have to spend a great deal more time on.
When we eat food, the microRNA from the food is picked up by the digestive system and not broken down. The microRNA is taken into our own body intact, ends up in our own cells, like in our liver and other cells in our body. And these microRNAs still have the same function. They change our genetics and they change our readout of our genome. And the significance is profound. It says when you eat genetically modified foods, we are eating a new class of microRNAs that have never really been in the world before. We used to think, oh, well, if you just cook the food, all of this stuff won't have an effect. And it turns out, number one, microRNAs are not affected by cooking, freezing, or long-term storage. If that's true, then why would you risk your life eating a genetically modified food containing microRNAs that can totally distort our own biology and cause great problems in our lives? The bacteria in our gut that are required for our survival, we need these bacteria. The bacteria also pick up the genetic engineered genes. And we modified the gut bacteria. And you say, well, why is that relevant? Well, not only do we need the gut bacteria for our survival, but the gut bacteria change our genetics. Information from the bacteria is picked up by the digestive cells and adjusts the digestive system cells to be compatible with the bacteria in our gut. There is a dialogue and a communication. If you alter the genetics of the gut bacteria, by definition, you've completely altered the development and genetics of our own cells.
These unexplained chronic symptoms, whether it's fatigue, brain fog, they feel like their brain is not working like it used to be, their metabolism is off, associated with brain issues, poor cognition, memory impairment, they can't think straight. Bacteria in our gut are producing the same neurotransmitters, the same brain chemicals that the neurons are in the brain. The brain produces serotonin, the happy molecule, so do the bacteria. The brain produces dopamine and GABA, so do the bacteria. And they're using these neurotransmitters to communicate. It's as if the microbiome is the conductor, the software that's setting the stage, that's leading the communication, both to send out warning signals and also to send signals for improvement, to improve neurological health and improve brain function. And these bacteria, the microbiome, also play a major role in gut health, the health of the gut wall. A lot of people now are familiar with this entity called leaky gut, where the gut wall is not healthy and partially digested foods leak through and toxins, and then you get more activation of the immune system and inflammation. But what people may not recognize is that the root cause of that is the microbiome is not as healthy as it should be, because if the microbiome is healthy, it's going to keep the gut wall healthy. So the microbiome has profound effects.
Many of the doctors that see patients don't take into account the fact that their gut is the doorway into the body. And because you may not be breaking down your foods if your enzymes are too low or hydrochloric acid's too low, you may not be getting all the nutrients in. You may be missing more than what you're taking in. So we can test that with the Heidelberg diagnostic test. We'll also look at a comprehensive stool test to understand if there are other organisms there beyond parasites. It'll look for yeast or fungal organisms, bacteria, viruses. So we have to be comprehensive in our approach.
The microbiome is the vast ecology of bacteria within us. Trillions of bacteria. They outnumber our own cells 10 to 1. Can you imagine? I'm mostly bacteria. I always joke with my patients, you think you're seeing me. You're just seeing a lot of bacteria dressed up in a suit. But These are not the bad guys. We demonized bacteria for 150 years. They were the virulent, disease-causing, and it certainly seems that way, but the truth is, at the deeper level, these are our greatest ally, bacteria.
The probiotics that everyone knows about now creates good bacteria, and that good bacteria here communicates with your brain. So the healthier your intestines, the better communication with your brain. This is all new science.
I see a lot of people who have both gut issues, what's been diagnosed as irritable bowel, right? And they're not getting better. They're on this medicine, still not getting better. And they also have anxiety and stress. And they can't think straight. And they never had this before. By healing the microbiome, dietary changes, knowing what foods they shouldn't be eating, the junk foods, the refined and processed foods, the foods that are full of chemicals and antibiotics, and eating the necessary foods to heal the bacteria, like we call those prebiotic foods, leeks and jicama and radishes, and foods that are fermented, like kimchi. These are all healing for the microbiome and for the gut. And then you understand that you can't be on antibiotics all the time. You have to sometimes question, is this antibiotic really necessary? Are there other ways of getting better? Because the overuse of antibiotics is hurting the microbiome. And it's not just getting it from the doctor, it's also in the poultry that we're eating. So we have to make lifestyle changes. And by healing this, the microbiome, we start to heal both issues.
That we can grow new brain cells and heart cells, things we never thought possible.
One of the greatest advances in medical therapy over many years has been stem cell therapy. This has been around for over 100 years. Research dates back to Germany in 1868, where Dr. Ernst Haeckel was doing research documenting this one type of cell that could become any other cell within your body. And over hundreds of thousands of studies and hundreds of thousands and more people who've done stem cell therapy, we have a great documentation of this process. Stem cells are the only cells in your body that can become and differentiate into anything else. Your brain, your eyes, your heart, your lungs, liver, kidney, pancreas, your gut. It's used for muscle and skin degeneration and damage as well. And protocols have come along that are clinical trial-based, FDA-approved protocols to extract stem cells from your body and to put them into the joint, put them intravenously or intravenous nasal for brain disorders, intravenous nebulized for lung disorders, and this is all being documented to get published. The protocols that I've done, we've seen some spectacular results with patients. Typically, we're gathering all this info on patients that have Alzheimer's, any type of arthritis, COPD, diabetes, erectile dysfunction, frailty syndrome, heart failure, liver, kidney failure, lupus, MS, Parkinson's, pulmonary fibrosis, stroke. So we're seeing a wide range of disorders that are helped now because your own cells can repair that damaged tissue, as opposed to just medications and drugs that may prolong the disease and then require more medication down the road. We have patients that have had Parkinson's disease for 12 years in a wheelchair that have, after one stem cell therapy, been able to see far better, more vivid color vision, improvement in movement, decrease in tremor, so much so that the patient's been able to get out of the wheelchair over the course of the first month of treatment. And of course, we have them doing physical therapy and everything we can to maximize their results, but nothing in the world would change that patient's prognosis. In a wheelchair for 12 years, no drug or surgery could correct any of that.
We've done mostly the alternative route and used very little medication, but recently he went from walking normally to a walker and now a wheelchair. When I have been researching stem cell therapy for the past 4 years, we made arrangements to have him have the procedure. And it's been 4 months. He had it on April 21st. And within 15 minutes of the procedure, when we left the building, he was telling me how much better his eyesight was. and that his brain fog had lifted. So he picked up a magazine and he started to read without his reading glasses, and he was able to read the fine print. Now he was pretty much a believer. Then we sat down to dinner, and he couldn't hold the fork normally for at least 2 or 3 years. And while he was eating, I noticed that he was eating a normal way. He looked down at his hand and he goes, "Oh my God, I'm holding the fork the right way." And he had absolutely no idea.
I've had Parkinson's for the past 12 years. I had the stem cell therapy initially done on April 21st of this year. Prior to that, I was in a wheelchair because I had fallen and broken a rib. I had difficulty with my balance. I couldn't walk. Since I had the stem cell therapy, I've been able to switch over to a walker, as well as a cane occasionally, or up and down the stairs. I found that I can improve my handwriting, as well as the tremors are getting fewer and far between. The episodes are getting fewer and far between. My balance is also improving, and my sense of smell is beginning to come back slowly too, over a period of time. And I'm able to walk a lot better, taking normal strides when I walk with the walker. My balance is getting better.
Another patient with MS, for 8 years in a wheelchair, was unable to move the entire right side of his body. So he would get into the wheelchair, electric wheelchair, with a left-handed stick to move him and bring him around. When he came in to see me, we spoke about doing stem cells. We did it. And the second day after doing stem cells, intravenously and a nasal application, which allows us to get stem cells to drip directly into the back of your nasal cavity into your brain.
This whole thing started around 2000 and with the MS, and I was just a click off, and I was still rodeoing and still doing my professional work and still involved with autos, mechanics, and rebuilding cars and antique cars and such. And I noticed that I was a click off, and I went to see many, many doctors in Manhattan. At this point, I was extremely lethargic. I had hard to keep my head up. Had very little strength in my body and my hands and my legs. I was wheelchair bound, and I could hardly stand up. And at that point, I said, I have to do something. So I got a phone call from my sister, who lives in West Islip, that tells me that she saw Dr. Cal on TV and that they administer stem cells. I made an appointment. I went to see Dr. Cal on December 8th. It was virtually painless. It was just a little discomfort when he retrieved the bone marrow, the stem cells from my pelvis. We drove home from his office, which was approximately 2 hours. Through this deterioration of my abilities, my whole right side is affected much, much more than the rest of my body. The next morning, which was 12 hours since I had this procedure, I went and did the same thing, only I lit the coffee, I poured the coffee, I carried the coffee, of course, in the mobility chair to the table. I put the coffee down, and I opened up the computer, and I started the microwave, and then I came back to the computer, and I'm working the keyboards. At that point, I looked down, and I realized that I'm doing this with my right hand. Every day has been an increase in my abilities and my core strength and the ability to get off a chair. I struggle to get off a chair with both arms pushing on the armrest of the chair, and I would never stand erect. I have now been able to stand straight. I could get off a chair or a commode without using any hands at all. To sum this all up, I feel that in the order in which I was losing abilities, I'm now gaining abilities. I hope to be walking with a cane in open spaces very shortly.
I think that over time, stem cell therapy, which has been frontline in almost every other country, in Europe and South America, will come to the front line and front stage here because insurance companies will start to realize that they're going to save a great deal of money on people with chronic degenerative diseases, and those people would not need to go for potentially risky drugs or surgical procedures. So stem cell therapy needs to take its rightful place here.
Here's the protocol, written up, presented. Here's the patient or patients. Let's study them. Unfortunately, there seems to be a bias. I wish there weren't, but there is. What do I mean?
The way I was trained in medical school was very frustrating. I had all these tools. People came to me and asked to be helped. And all I gave them was excuses and pills, and they never got better. And as a result, I looked at what I was doing and I said, why am I being a doctor? This is very frustrating to be a doctor who offers remedies who don't help people. I mean, we help people when it comes to acute problems like lacerations and breaks and infections. But not when it comes to chronic disease like diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease. There we fail.
It's when people are told their cholesterol level's too high, their blood pressure's too high, here, take these pills, and they say, doctor, how long do I have to take these? The doctor usually says, forever. And what we're learning is that the lifestyle choices that we make each day, what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, how much love and support we have, can often not only help prevent, but even reverse the progression of these conditions. And under their doctor's supervision, many people can reduce or even get off of many of these medications.
If they were paid based on the success of their patients, how many of them got off blood pressure pills and got normal blood pressure? How many dropped their cholesterol 100 points? How many of them stopped chest pain? How many of them lost 50 pounds? If you paid them based on success, then you'll see doctors wanting to learn how to cure their patients.
Modern medicine's approach to chronic disease is we are going to mediate the impact. We're going to slow down the progression of your disease. We're going to delay the time in which your kidneys fail and you go blind and we amputate your lower extremities. That's the best modern medicine can really offer for a disease like type 2 diabetes that can be reversed, that can be cured.
I would say pretty much the entire population of the United States, plus Australia, New Zealand, Europe, and now we have China and India coming on board not only to the American diet, but to the American epidemics. These problems have only existed worldwide in this kind of proportion for about the last 35 years. If you're old enough to remember beyond that, you remember when people were thin and healthy all over the world, not just in China or Japan, but in the United States and Europe and Africa and South America. Now all that's changed. They report, for example, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, they report that in 1980, fewer than 1% of the population of China had diabetes. Whereas in 2013, 12% of the entire population of China has frank diabetes.
And the World Obesity Federation has revealed that China is on track to have the greatest number of overweight children by 2025.
With 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 11 girls now obese, the trend poses huge health risks for the country's children. The study also predicts that by 2025, China will have nearly 50 million obese children.
This is the same size photo of a 10-year-old with a staggering weight of 130 kilograms, almost 4 times that of an ordinary kid. His doctor says the main cause of childhood obesity is an unhealthy diet.
小孩呢以吃快餐为荣，然后基本每天都去到快餐店去吃。
Many children think it's fashionable to eat fast foods like McDonald's, and many are eating them every day. Some drink a lot of beverages that contain a lot of sugar, taking them as water. If we don't raise awareness among parents on the seriousness of the problem, this situation will only become worse as the economy continues to grow.
Remember the kings and queens who ate all the meat and the dairy and the cakes and the pies? They ended up fat and sick and with the gout. Well, that's what I see, but in epidemics of now probably 2 or 3 billion people worldwide. As a doctor, if you take this simple understanding, it's the food. If you take that understanding and you just correct what the problem is, and that is eating like aristocrats, and you get people eating like they have for, wow, hundreds of thousands of years, people have lived on diets based on starches. Those are foods like corn, beans, rice, breads, for hundreds of thousands of years. And they've been runners, all kinds of athletes. They've been involved in all kinds of wars, protecting their civilizations. And they've done that on these simple plant foods.
It's a total approach, 25 to 35% carbohydrate diet, which basically is vegetables and fibrous vegetables and sea vegetables and a little bit of low glycemic fruit, a protein that's somewhere between 10 and 20%, and 25 to 45% fat. Where I vary with many of the vegan doctors is I don't support the low-fat diet. And all the research is out there doesn't really support that. Cholesterol is not a problem for heart disease.
You can get people off insulin, get people off their oral hypoglycemic drugs, their blood sugar drugs. Within a matter of weeks, they can have lower blood sugars off, dozens of units less insulin. That's the power of plants.
So the first thing you must do is pick a starch, at least one. And you can live on one starch alone. You can live on sweet potatoes or potatoes and water alone. You can't do that on grains and legumes. Rice, corn, beans, those type of things. You have to add some vegetables and fruits to get vitamin A and C and folic acid. So these starches, the ones that grow above ground, grains and legumes, have to have some vegetables with them in the diet, but just a couple, a couple of slices of orange, a couple of flowerets of broccoli, just a little bit of vegetable matter along with the bulk of it being starch. And I've seen people lose 100 pounds, 200 pounds. I have seen them reverse artery disease. People scheduled for bypass surgery. They stopped the bypass surgery because the chest pain went away. In fact, I would estimate probably 95% of the heart surgeries could be stopped. Even after the schedule, they could be stopped.
About a third of Americans die each year from heart disease, and yet it's completely preventable in just about everybody if they're willing to make big enough changes in diet and lifestyle. For the last 40 years, I've directed a series of randomized clinical trials and demonstration projects, and we were able to show for the first time that simple lifestyle changes, eat well, move more, stress less, love more, can actually reverse the progression of even severe coronary heart disease. This included a whole foods plant-based diet that's naturally low both in fat and in refined carbs or sugar, various stress management techniques including meditation and yoga, moderate exercise, walking a half an hour a day for example, and what we call psychosocial support, which is really love and intimacy or support groups. And we've been using these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be. And the more diseases we study and the more underlying biological mechanisms we look at, the more reasons we have to explain why these simple changes are so powerful and how quickly people can not only feel better, but they are better in ways we can measure.
Program at 2 local hospitals is promising to undo heart disease for patients with heart trouble.
And this prescription includes no medication. Really interesting. WSBT 22's Kristen Bean is here. And Kristen, it does, though, include a lot of lifestyle changes.
Yeah, but the results are amazing. Right now, the Ornish Reversal program is offered at Memorial and Elkhart General Hospitals. It isn't easy, but patients who participate say it's worth it.
David Foster is 57. He's a Navy veteran and a retired paramedic. He and his wife are raising a beautiful 8-month-old baby girl adopted as a newborn. But in July, he was told he would need a heart transplant. His heart troubles had caught up with him. He had 100% blockages in his heart. That's when someone told him about the Ornish Reversal program. Doctors say it's scientifically proven to undo heart disease.
I had made up my mind then and there that I was going to beat this thing. So I've never really thought about the dying.
The Ornish program requires patients to make major lifestyle changes. They spend 9 weeks learning how to eat a low-fat, plant-based diet. They have to exercise, undergo stress management, and participate in group support.
We're not going to be taking a pill, but we're going to modify what we do in our life, and we're going to build our life around these healthy practices so that we can enjoy a healthy life, not spend our life in fear of when the next cardiac event is coming.
Doctors say 90% of patients who complete the program continue these lifestyle changes after a year. Foster is sticking with his and recently learned his heart function has improved and he no longer needs that heart transplant.
There are over 8 randomized trials that have shown that in stable people with stable heart disease, stents and angioplasties really don't work. They don't prolong life, they don't prevent heart attacks. And in the latest study, where they actually did a sham stents, where they had a randomized trial, one group got stents put in, the other group didn't, but they actually put the tube into the heart without actually putting the stent in and pulled it out, and they found that the reduction in angina or chest pain was comparable in both groups. So stents don't even reduce angina in people who have stable heart disease. The same is true for bypass surgery, that unless you have the most severe form of heart disease, but bypass surgery really doesn't work that well either. Now, if you're in the middle of having a heart attack, bypass surgery and stents and angioplasties can be life-saving, but the vast majority of people that have been operated on were stable, and they don't work.
And it's what we have published in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. We can prevent, treat, and reverse the #1 killer of men and women, heart disease. We can prevent, treat, arrest, reverse type 2 diabetes and obesity and hypertension, some of the leading causes of death and disability.
The studies have shown that getting your blood sugar down with drugs doesn't work nearly as well at preventing the horrible complications of type 2 diabetes as getting it down with diet and lifestyle. And the same is true for men with early stage prostate cancer. There was a major study in the New England Journal of Medicine, major randomized trial that came out recently, and they found that after 10 years, men who had early stage prostate cancer who did nothing lived as long as those who had surgery or radiation. Now, if the choice is between doing nothing and doing something, most guys who have prostate cancer want to, quote, do something, even if the treatment is often worse than the condition. Many men who have surgery or radiation often get maimed in the most personal ways. They either are impotent, they can't have sex, or they're incontinent, having to wear diapers, for very little, if any, gain at huge economic and personal costs. Now, there's about 1 out of 50 men who actually benefit from surgery or radiation who have prostate cancer, and Dr. Carroll has developed these algorithms to help identify who those people are so that the others can not just necessarily do nothing, but have an aggressive lifestyle intervention that we found can actually affect the progression of early stage prostate cancer.
We know right now we can reduce the common cancers by more than 90%. It can happen right now if people ate differently. We know that we don't have to have a population with premature strokes and with dementias living in nursing homes in their later lives. What kind of life is that? What kind of life do you have if you're on dialysis? If you're stuck in a nursing home and not mobile, you don't have your full mental faculties intact. That's not a life. I'd rather be dead than have that. And the point is that our modern food industrial complex and the way people are eating have caused all these things. And doctors can't intervene. They can't solve these things. They can't put people back. They can't Humpty Dumpty put the person back together again with drugs. Only with the right nutrition do we have the power to undo this damage, and we have to start now.
What happens is the blood flow improves, the arteries become wider open, more relaxed, the flow is greater, the chest pain goes away, and all this along with the disappearance of the diabetes and the extra weight and so on, results in people actually being cured.
High blood pressure, probably the #1 dietary risk factor for death the world over, is a disease that can be prevented, can be arrested, and reversed with a healthy enough diet and lifestyle behaviors. So we could basically eliminate this entire disorder. And what would that do? It wouldn't just be devastating to the pharmaceutical industry, but actually to, doctors' own pocketbooks.
Your spouse wants a vacation. You got to pay the car payments. And you find out you have to make money. Well, the average office visit is 7 minutes. Pretty hard to charge much more than $100 for that. But the average heart surgery, which takes, maybe an hour, half an hour, costs somewhere between $150,000 and $350,000. So if you're looking for a job to make your family happy and to make you happy if you have those kind of material desires, what would you pick? 10 minutes of talking to your patients and making less than $100, or a half an hour operation and making yourself $50,000 or $100,000?
I began thinking if we just had good science, that would change medical practice. And so we trained through our nonprofit Preventive Medicine Research Institute. We trained 53 hospitals and clinics around the country, from the most prestigious academic to community hospitals. And we got bigger changes in lifestyle, better clinical outcomes, bigger cost savings, and better adherence than anyone's ever shown. And yet a number of the sites closed down because we didn't have the reimbursement. And so the painful lesson was it's not enough to have good science, you also have reimbursement. That we doctors get trained to do and what we get reimbursed to do, and we get paid to do what we get reimbursed to do. So if we could change reimbursement, we could change medical practice and even medical education. And it's not because doctors don't want to do the right thing, but if we're trained to use drugs and surgery and we're reimbursed to use drugs and surgery, that's what most doctors do.
Of course, there are financial constraints. There are reimbursement issues. Doctors just aren't reimbursed for telling people how to take better care of themselves. You can imagine how much inertia there is to consider these safe, simple, side effect-free solutions.
In the year 2011, I went to the Congress of California. I went to the legislature and I proposed a new bill, SB 380, which would require doctors in the state of California to learn about human nutrition. It would require the 11 medical schools to teach something about nutrition, something worthwhile. The state of California passed that law, SB 380. It was passed unanimously by both houses, and then Governor Jerry Brown signed it in September of 2011. It's in practice. By law, you must teach medical human nutrition, but they got around it. What they did is they gave the medical board the job of deciding what medical education would be. And what they did is they decided that it would be a paragraph in their newsletter once a year, and they put out no requirements for medical schools to teach nutrition. They put out no notifications that I know of hospitals to start teaching their doctors that heart disease and type 2 diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis and constipation are caused by diet, and the right diet to correct it.
There is a severe nutrition deficiency in education for doctors. Less than a quarter of medical schools have a single dedicated course in nutrition.
I've seen over my last 25 years of being a physician, seeing tens of thousands of patients, and these people fly in from all over the world to see me because of my specialty. And I've seen these people get well from what are considered incurable conditions. And it's been tremendously rewarding, and that's why I'm working now to also with nutritional research, trying to get some of these studies done to impress on the medical profession that these nutritional protocols are so effective. So look, I'm not alone doing this, and there are a lot of people across the country that know about this, and this movement of lifestyle medicine is getting stronger every day. And we're all in this together, and we all want America to be a super healthy nation. And my message is that if you're sick, don't lose hope, because it's possible through superior nutrition for you to get well, even when your local doctor may not give you that opportunity, even when he tell you there's no hope. There is hope, because my career has shown me that more often than not, people can not only prevent disease, but actually can reverse the disease that occurred from their poor nutrition in the first half of their life.
So, the optimistic message is that the vast majority of premature death and disability can be prevented. We have tremendous power over our health destiny and longevity.
I received a what we call Shaktipat meditation that kind of awakens the spiritual energy, and I had a very particular vision which says you need to learn to eat and live in a way that supports the spiritual energy. But the key to the cure is moving in your context from what I call the culture of death, which puts business, money, power, ego at the center, to moving into what I call the culture of life, which is putting your soul at the center. It's from that people are really motivated to live the lifestyle and maintains them in a healthy state. So that's kind of the process for me.
Let's say that ideal health is 100 and sickness is 1. So how do I put health on my side? The best diet you could eat, which is a mixed, colorful, rainbow, plant-based diet, will give you about 15, meaning 15% of total health is diet. But 15% is also exercise, exercising 6 days a week, about an hour a day, both resistance exercise and aerobic exercise, and some really intense exercise. You can actually lengthen your telomeres. These are the end-capped proteins on your chromosomes. When they're longer and your cells take longer to divide, the longer you live. When they're shorter and your cells are rapidly dividing, the shorter you live. Exercise, you live longer. Stress management, you live longer. Vitamin C, quercetin, L-carnosine, resveratrol, pycnogenol, these all allow your cells to heal, replace dead cells, and rejuvenate and extend the telomeres so you live longer. Remember, the longer your telomeres, the longer you live.
We did a study with Elizabeth Blackburn, who received the Nobel Prize for her pioneering work with telomeres. And we found that these same lifestyle changes could actually lengthen telomeres by about 10%, in a sense reversing aging at a cellular level. And so I think there is this convergence of forces that's, after 40 years, is making a difference, is finding the right idea at the right time. And lifestyle medicine is, to me, the most exciting trend in medicine, and it's a wave that hasn't even really begun to crest yet.
We also know that that plant-based diet means you're more likely to have healthier nutrient intake and lower caloric intake. And all of science, everything in science shows the number one way you live a longer life, restrict your calorie intake to what your body actually requires. We just eat too much and we're overweight, and that shortens our life.
All chronic disease is accelerated aging. And we consider absolutely essential for healing all chronic diseases. If you're exercising, you're creating an antidepressant effect with your hormones. And if you're meditating, you get in touch with your soul. Yoga, stretching, and I'm going to put one more thing in there, relationships.
One of the things I know from my own life is that if I am not deeply looking after my psyche and my consciousness through meditation and through prayer and through walking in nature and through delighting in the glory of art and of music, if I'm not truly dedicating serious time to that, I can become so invaded by the vast stress that is epidemic in our culture. And if someone like myself, who has been doing this work after all for 40 years, has to really watch it, imagine those who haven't been introduced to the ways in which you can unify your consciousness with the world and calm it down.
It's very important to consider what I call the urgent present. The brain is designed to project time and space. So when you wake up in the morning, you're already projecting time and space. And if that time and space is one where you're putting 15 things that you're going to do for that day, you're already compressing your day by trying to do something that is beyond the time and space that's available. So what's going to happen, you're going to be rushed all the time. You're going to be on adrenaline all the time. Your blood pressure will go up. Your immune system will be deficient because of the suppression that it does when you have stress hormones. And someone else may wake up same day, same age, and they don't compress the time. They see that they see an elongation of the day, and they say, I have plenty of time to do the things that I need to do.
There's an enormous body of scientific evidence that shows that the more stressed you are, chronic stress, the more insecure you are, the more frustrated you are, the more depressed you are, the shorter your lifespan, higher incidence of heart attacks and strokes. Cortisol, which is necessary as a flight or fight hormone, when it's elevated, it kills you. And think of all the times we get angry, or we hold on to something negative and reinforce that thought over and over again. We're stressing ourselves to the point of distress, and that kills us. So happy people are not walking around emotionally bent out of shape. They're not allowing their head to explode over everything and personalize everything like somehow everything is a problem. They're not creating unnecessary drama. Let's just say that you're able to deal with all three of those. You got a really good diet, you're really exercising, and you're de-stressing. That's terrific. But that gives you about 45 to 50% of what you need for ideal health. And that's why we have people who are taking their supplements and exercising and still have their diabetes and still have disease. The other 50% equal to all that is the quality of your valued beliefs. What do you believe in? The role of family, senior citizens who are not abandoned in our society and no longer have any value, and they're lonely. Loneliness is a big killer. Happiness with good quality relationships, a good support system, lengthens our life.
The way in which old people feel utterly useless, utterly unwanted, and are often living alone without any company or any help, then you just think, my God, what kind of a culture have we become? But if you think of both this tragic vulnerability of the feminine and our inability to cherish and honor elders in the terms of health, what you see is that human beings now are living random, conscienceless, disconnected, lonely, meaningless lives, which create tremendous psychic disturbance and depression and distress, which undermine radically the immune system.
50 years ago, most Americans had an extended family they saw regularly. They had a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people who lived in the same place. They had a job that felt secure, that they'd been at for 10 years or more. They had a church or synagogue they went to regularly. And now many people have none of those things. And what we're learning is that one of the advantages of growing up in, say, a neighborhood with 2 or 3 generations of people is they know you. They don't just know your Facebook profile or your biosketch. You know, some studies are showing that people who spend a lot of time on Facebook actually end up feeling more depressed because it looks like everybody's got this perfect life but me, like what's wrong with me? But if you grow up in a family with, 2 or 3 generations of people, they know you and they know where you messed up and they know your dark side. They've seen you grow up and you know that they know and they know that you know that they know. And there's just something very primal about knowing that people see you, not just your best side, but all of you, and they're still there for you, they still love for you, and they still care for you.
The piece of the puzzle that we don't use in America is what cultures all over the world have used, and the Chinese and the Japanese and the Indian cultures, family. Well, in other countries, they sit down and they have one course at a time and they talk about life and they try to share the insights they have. And if there's a problem, they all collectively try to solve it. And so you've got an enormous support system. Well, today, we don't have support systems.
Our relationships and our aloneness are very important in the process of health and in the causes of health. We could be alone and not feel lonely, or we could be in a bad relationship and feel very lonely. And the difference is that if you are alone by choice and you have meaning in your life by choice, you can have a select group of people. You don't even have to be in a relationship, a romantic relationship. But what's important is that you have to have meaning in what you do. Now, a good relationship is one that our culture tells us that we have to avoid, which is admiration. Our culture tells you admiring yourself and admiring other people is okay, but not yourself. A good relationship, what I have found in looking at people that have been in good relationships for 70, 80 years, is they constantly admire each other. I love what you did. This is beautiful. I'm proud of you. That's extremely important because it's really confirming your excellence. It's not ego. This is a very powerful thing. We're social beings that require people who love us to let us know that we're valuable to them.
Being willing to take care of yourself, to know that, to love yourself, and that there is people out there that if you are lost, they can, they can help you with that. I was one of those, and I was a really lucky one.
There's a great spiritual component to patients, and traditionally doctors have become so distanced from that, they don't ask the people or patients what their spirituality is like or what they believe in and what their goals are and how happy they are with life. That's got to be a discussion to be had, because if you're not correcting or improving that, the patient's not going to do as well as they could. However, When you correct their diet, vitamins, minerals, hormones, and now the brain is working better. There's less anxiety, irritability, less panic sensations. Patients start to feel rewarded from this, and it reinforces their desire to continue doing it. But I tell people you need to understand that every day, every hour, 2, 3, 4 hours, you need to stop, take a deep breath, focus on your favorite things, your favorite people, your favorite place in the world, close your eyes, and start reinforcing the positive.
We're not just part of a society that's rooted in consumption, but we're human beings that want to help, to care for the other. We're human beings that want to express our compassion, our love, our caring, and to be part of a community of similar, like-minded people. That's going to be the dominant aspect of who we are. That's going to be what's motivating us to make the correct, the good decisions for our benefit and for the benefit of society.
One of the latest researches that's being done now with psychoneuroimmunology, they're looking back from Aristotle. When he talked about hedonic pleasure, which is pleasure for the sake of itself, and eudaimonic pleasure, which is pleasure with meaning, pleasure with purpose, pleasure with service, that people who have a hedonic lifestyle, for example, abusing drugs, abusing consumerism, abusing anything, or doing it just for the sense of the pleasure, have a weaker immunological response to adversity than people who have the eudaimonic way of life, which is they have purpose in what they do, they have service in what they do, they have rituals that they consider to be valuable to them. So what we're finding is that the immune system responds and can identify the eudonic and hedonic, but the ones who are the happy with purpose are the ones who have the better immunological response to adversity.
When people are socially connected, they actually live longer. And they're happier.
If we leave out that dimension of who we are, it's preposterous to think that we're going to be able to heal at a deep level, or even heal at all. And if we do seem to get better, we're basically shuffling symptoms. But how do we really heal deeper so that all the other modalities of treatment that we may use will really work in the way that, in a synergistic way with the bottom line treatment? So in many, many cultures throughout thousands of years of history, this was well known that there is a spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual dimension of who we are. And you can't leave that out in terms of healing.
That part of our minds that I like to think of as the ego mind, that part that thinks that we're separate from the all that is, rather than being part of what physicists now call the one unified field of consciousness. Or as physicist and Nobel Prize-winning physicist Erwin Schrödinger put it, the number of minds I've been able to observe in the universe is one. Quite an amazing statement. And what that means is that we're all interconnected and not separate, as we think we are. But in that illusion of separateness, as Einstein put it, he says it's just an optical illusion we're separate. And he was close to his deathbed, he was saying the one thing I wanted to prove most was our interconnectedness. And he hadn't quite been able to do that yet. That's the recognition that even the new science is taking us, that it's consciousness that rules over matter, not the other way around.
Well, we now know from psychoneuroimmunology, the science of how what we think impacts our body, that you can directly impact your DNA. Good thoughts, happy thoughts, positive thoughts, good DNA. You're preventing disease. You're reversing disease. Depression, anxiety, uncertainty, pain, fear, guilt, shame, insecurity. You create disease. You tell your body what to do and the body responds. You turn off the healing of the DNA when you're in a negative state of being, when you're in rage, when you're in anger, when you're in chronic stress. Your DNA is not helping you.
One of the fabulous new insights offered by the epigenetic story is simply that brain chemistry is really what controls our genetics. And when you understand this, it really makes sense out of something that's been a medical mystery for a long time called the placebo effect. The placebo effect is how a thought can generate healing even though you might be using a sugar pill or a sham operation It wasn't the medical intervention that created the healing, it was the thought. Now we understand through epigenetics how that works, is because when you have a positive thought, you release the chemistry of a positive nature into your blood, which encourages the growth and health of your cells. But it also explains something more important that is not discussed by the public, and that is called the nocebo effect. The nocebo effect is when a negative thought or a negative belief interferes with your health. Well, it turns out a placebo and a nocebo are equally powerful. It's just that a positive effect takes you in a positive direction toward health, but a negative belief can actually cause disease and can kill you just by the chemistry released into the body from the brain. So the significance about all of this comes down to a simple understanding. What do you believe about life? Because what you see and what you believe is translated into chemistry. And that chemistry is a reflection of that belief. If it's a healthy belief, then you release healthy chemistry. If it's a negative belief, you release negative chemistry.
For example, people that have been in concentration camps, not only do they have a gene expression of tremendous cortisol and norepinephrine and other stress hormones, but they pass that propensity on to their next generation. And studies have shown that children from people who come from those adversity types of environments have a higher baseline of the stress hormones passed on epigenetically. So epigenetically, not only are you passing it on to another generation, but what you're doing is you're creating biology with your internal world, what I call the internal environment, which is your phenomenology, your thoughts. What if you live a life where your phenomenology is that the world is dangerous? Then you will confirm that the world is dangerous in everything that you find that's dangerous. And no one can get you out of that because you're confirming what you're believing.
And it even relates to aging. The concept of aging releases chemistry that will cause us to age. It's a belief. There was a wonderful study where they took elderly people away from their regular environment, took them to a resort, and at the resort, they put them into an environment that had newspapers and music and magazines and films from 50 years before, when they were young people. In 1 week, just being in that environment of being back as a young person, when they checked their physiology, all the parameters they checked revealed in just 1 week there was profound unaging, a reverse of aging. They actually got younger. From what? Being in an environment that encouraged youth. So the concept of aging, is it real? And the answer is, it's real if you believe it. And yet the reality is, we must change that cultural perception and start to recognize that we do not have to age like that. A human lifespan is far greater than 140 years. The problem is, it's our lifestyle and our cultural beliefs that are shortening our lifespan at this moment. And all it is just a change of belief. No chemistry or drugs needed.
We know one thing, for example, that yes, there might be some genetic influence, but now the new field of epigenetics says that genes aren't etched in stone like we were once taught. That what's above the genes is consciousness. And I find that there are tools that can be used to deactivate that information that seems to change people's behavior.
If we want to change our lives, then we really have to undo the kind of initial programming that really disempowered us and limited us and really provided us with self-sabotaging behaviors. Not because we want these behaviors, but because these programs were put into us, and more or less we become victims of the program. This classification of victims only lasts until you identify the fact that you can reprogram the biology, because upon doing so, then you can rewrite the disempowering beliefs that we acquired in our development.
There's a very small percentage of illnesses that are really from aberrations of chromosomes. The rest are learned in the sense of what you do with your body, and they can be reversible, as many have been reversed, that we call them spontaneous healing, or we call it magic, or we call it whatever it is that we call it. It's happened. If it's happened, it means that there's a reality to it and there's evidence to it. So what we need to look is for the components of those outliers that show us that what we thought was incurable becomes curable. That's what we have to look for, and identify the ingredients, and you're going to find that the ingredients are very internal, not external.
The prefix epi means above. So when I say epigenetic control, what I'm saying is control above the genes. Most of us, actually, about 5% of humans on this planet arrived here with defects in their genes that would interfere with their life. Okay, that's a small percentage, about 5%. But what does it mean? 95% of us got here with a perfectly adequate set of genes to have a healthy, prosperous, loving existence on this planet.
There are a lot of other studies being done now about the power of the mind, you know, beyond just my own skull. And some of it's done with the Heart Math Institute out in California. Some of their studies have been that. I guess Larry Dossey summarized a lot of studies about that in terms of healing, you know, and what people call prayer. But he defined prayers, regardless of the religious system, as just the deepest intent of the heart. And he found when people hold that conscious intent, or groups of them would, other people did heal faster, some other places. So what we're getting to now with a lot of studies, we talk about the DNA. Even that's affected by it. You put a strain of DNA in a petri dish and observe it under a microscope, and you have somebody come in the room and think negative thoughts, angry thoughts, fear thoughts, that constricts itself into a knot. If you have them come in and think happy thoughts or loving thoughts, that strain of DNA relaxes and unfolds and it's just there peaceful in a dish. Well, that tells us that all of my thoughts are not only affecting all the cells in my body, but there's really no such thing as a private thought. All of my thoughts are going out affecting unknown numbers of people.
We are not our brain. The essence of a human being is not our intelligence. The essence of who we are is something so much deeper. It's related to the heart and beyond. It's related to our essence. But as we grow as human beings, and we see this in all of nature, now we have this desire within us, a will within us to care about the other.
We're social beings and we require a connection with people, but not just a connection with people, a connection with quality people that can confirm our goodness and that we can confirm theirs. Those are really the important components. The common denominator there is that they have meaning in their lives and that they create a lifestyle independent of those socioeconomics that gives them purpose to get up in the morning. And one of the easiest way to find out if you're having purpose, you get up in the morning, are you excited with the day, or are you regretting that you're starting the day?
We need to inspire people, inspire ourselves first of all, start with ourselves. Practice our meditation to control our thoughts. Do other tools that we can use, any tools we can use to control my thoughts. Focus on the positive side for myself and for everybody around me. Emanate that out into the world for our leaders. If we begin to do that, I believe, down deep inside myself, it can make a big, big difference in the world. A big difference in health, a big difference in happiness, happy relationships, governments that care about each other and people, and so on. If we just really all changed, or collectively, more and more of us, changed what we focus on.
When you look at ancient civilizations and how they worked, you can see that one of the reasons they were able to live decent, healthy lives was that they had a profound sacred connection to the whole cosmos. They really knew who they were and who human beings are. And that enabled them to be in a state of openness and gratitude and joy for the world. And modern studies have shown us that when you live with that sense of being held in a cosmos that you belong to, that is the most powerful foundation for health. Secondly, I think when you look at ancient cultures, what you see too is a tremendous strength of community. And in our culture, all of our communities are so splintered. In ancient cultures, and you can see this in modern shamanic cultures, there's such a strong sense of community that nobody feels abandoned or lost or alone. Thirdly, I think in ancient cultures, human life was given a tremendous dignity. If you look at Egypt or you look at the Mayans, you can see that human beings were seen as sacred bridges between this world and the other world. And there was an immense theology and immense rituals around that. And whether you agree with that theology or those rituals or you don't, believing that you have that dignity as a human being is a tremendous sense of strength. So if you take those three kinds of factors, you see that in the ancient world, there were the foundations for spiritual, moral, and physical health. And this is what we need to recapture.
There's another worldview of the new physics of the last century that confirms a lot of ancient wisdom throughout much of the world. Now, the power of consciousness or mind and belief and what I think and what the results of that are. Now, think of the Buddha saying 2,600 years ago, you are what you think. With your thoughts you make your world. Ancient Judaism said the same thing. Christianity said the same thing. You know, throughout all ancient wisdom. But we're not letting ourselves live that and promote that. We keep in our culture promoting something outside us because you can make money on it and sell it.
I think that what we're creating, the society of abundance, which is good to have abundance, but it has to be quality abundance. And it has to allow the body to use the wisdom that it accumulated as Homo sapiens for 150,000 years. Mourning your dead, mourning the end of a relationship, allowing yourself to feel anxious. And these things are part of what the body learned to deal with adversity, the resilience that we have, resilience with thriving. But if we're gonna Band-Aid it with either an immediate medication or we're gonna Band-Aid it with buying something in order to take care of the need that we have that needs to be dealt with inside, then what happens is it exacerbates the problem. And then you have, of course, the side effects of medications that create an additional problem for you, and then you have to take another medication to deal with the side effects of the medication.
We spend more money on health care than any other country in the world, and yet we're not the healthiest country in the world. In fact, we're number 30. We're not addressing the human being, who we are at our inner point. So who are we? Who are we?
Doctors don't address this when they're talking to their patients. They don't even consider their patients in terms of the overall quality of their lives. They just give them drugs and they just talk to them as if they're machines that need fixing, when in fact what needs to be addressed is the way in which someone is living his or her whole life. That's what needs to be addressed with great tenderness and sophistication and subtlety and compassion, but firmly, so that that person can truly see that unless they deepen their relationships, unless they cultivate friendships, unless they really evolve ways of living in dignity and in love and compassion with other human beings and with pets, they will never find the life joy, the inner energy, the passion that they need to sustain their life force and to live a healthy life.
There is much more than medications in this world, than that there were people out there that dedicate their life to make other life people better. Get a little bit educated and dedicate yourself to listen to the people that can guide you.
The programming here, there's a belief system that's collective that needs to be worked on, a person at a time, a consciousness at a time, to go internally and find out what you need and know that you have internal wisdom that's been around for 150,000 years, at least as the modern Homo sapiens that we are.
We have our increased collective consciousness, more and more people thinking thoughts of peace, thinking more and more thoughts about happiness, more and more thoughts that are less critical, more and more thoughts that are just wonderfully creative, more and more thoughts that are healthy. What if we had our TV programs being instead of 95% negative and violent, conveying to people how people's thoughts affected people positively? What a difference that could make in the world.
For me, the key in healing is getting people to love themselves enough to want to heal themselves.
It's been quite a journey, but my willingness and the teachers at hand, I can say I'm blessed. For that, I'm blessed.
Thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in the health field, from dietitians to nutritionists to nurses to physicians, chiropractors, they've been helping us live a longer life, especially those who have brought in the entirety, the whole picture. Now, let's say you have diabetes and it's at 50. So you get your diet right, your exercise right, your stress management right, and you just start the process of dealing with life issues better, more appropriately. Now the healing is up around 60 and diabetes is 50, and you begin to collapse down the disease process, because in our body, no two energies are going to be equal. And whatever energy you're leading with, that's the dominant energy. And if healing, happiness, joy, creativity, determination, belief, faith is your dominant energy, you're collapsing in uncertainty, insecurity, confusion. And you're going to live a longer life. And you're going to see cures. And that's what I've seen in my life.